G'day there you lot, welcome back down my shed. I'm BC. We're at the wall down drill press about to drill a few holes, and I thought some of you might like to see it. I had one subscriber inquiry as to please could I film when I tension the bearings on the high speed quill, and I don't personally believe that those bearings have to be tensioned to an exact amount. If you were running it all day, yes, I'd like to see it running the lubrication properly. Too tight and you'll be squeezing the oil out of the grooves. I'll show you later. I'm surprised with the business end bearing, that's the one that holds the quill. There's actually a retaining screw goes into the outer race to stop the outer race turning, and that's something I haven't seen in the Spindle like this before. But one thing that did catch my eye, just a little bearing retaining nut from the quill end, and it's an extra fine thread, something that I haven't used before. It's not cycle thread, that's for sure. So out with the old trusty thread gauges, and all the thread gauges finer than 32 TPI were seized together. I've never measured anything finer than 3/8 UNEF, I suppose, in my working life, but drop them up and they're fit for micrometer thread, 40 TPI. Now I haven't seen anything that fine on a bearing retainer nut before, but yeah, that is awfully bloody fine. So what I intend to do, the only pin spanner I do have is this fellow, and that's 4.27, you wouldn't believe it, diameter pins, and they're just a little bit bigger than the holes in the nut. So I'm just going to throw the nut up on the drill press, clamp it with the clamp, and just ease those holes out till they fit the spanner, and that'll let me tighten up that bearing retainer nut. I'll do all that off camera because you don't need to see a little bit of swarf flying and me fumbling and making a fool of myself. But when it comes down to another look at the spindle, I've got one piece of machinery or crap off the bench, and gradually I'm going to get a workbench back out of this, but I think you'd like to see some of it coming back together and how well it's cleaned up. I'll bring you back then. Bye for now. Okay guys, now I hope I'm getting this right. It's a little bit confusing because it's an unusual spindle from what I've seen in the past. Okay, I've got the quill through the middle of it to try and keep the bearing spacer lined up. It's no use tightening everything up on the bearing spacer and then you can't get it lined up to put the shaft through the middle of it. This bearing at the back is the only thing that I could really discern as something different from the parts list, and it has the screw goes through the body into the outer race. There's actually a slot cut into the outer race to stop the rotation of the bearing at the back, and that denotes that as the pulley end bearing. And you can see from the front of the sleeve here that there's a fair bit of corrosion on the front that would show me that that part was protruding from the front of the sleeve inside the housing over here. So that's about all I've got to go on. I'll just make sure while I've got it in the vise that this screw is tight. Yep, that's not going to fall out if anywhere. And the pin spanner I've put into the front bearing, and look, all of these bearings I don't think need 100 foot-pounds of torque. They need the slack pulled up out of them, especially on the thrust bearings here, but other than that, that's about all I'll give it. Oh, starting to move in the vise. And that's about it. Any more and I'm just going to slip and slide away. It's good that the quill can still go through the middle of it. And now I can tighten up the nut at the back. Re-drilling those holes to suit the pins on this pin spanner is really working a treat. Just tighten it up. It works. worked its way loose. Must be my brute strength. Okay, that's tight. One thing you do notice as you age and the arthritis steps in, you lose quite a bit of your motive power. And that's tight. Okay. And everything spins quite freely. So now, as it's an oil-fed bearing, and the little word here says oil, I'll pump several good squirts of thin weight hydraulic oil into it. Now one thing I don't do is overfill any of these high-speed spindles, because all you do is turn it into a giant bloody oil pump, and as you would all know, 2 or 3 horsepower and an oil pump's going to create a lot of heat, and eventually that'll oxidise the oil and cause you a lot of bearing failure troubles. I actually had a 33 horsepower water pump fail on a farm I had, and wasn't getting any water through it, and when I finally turned it down, even though the pump was still full of a bit of residual oil, it was absolutely smoking hot. Right, that'll do. Because there wasn't enough fluid in there to let the heat get away. If nothing else, that's more oil than I had before. Okay, that part of it's done. Next I'll slide the quill into the housing, and I may do that offline because it could involve a bit of butchering. See you later. Okay, I've brought the light in a little bit closer. Might make it a bit easier for you. The brake line is horizontal on the spindle at the moment, because that will then be the vertical once it's turned up and mounted onto the machine. As you can see, you've got a couple of dismantling wedges driven in there. The sleeve is really tight on the housing, and there's 2 big clamp bolts to go in when we go off camera. Now a couple of things to go in. That is the rear labyrinth seal, and I thought that it was only a single stage, but there is one stage with a little slinger inside behind the bearing, and then this outer stage around the periphery. But if you have a good look at that, you can see all the little divots around the outside. I've had to file them down to get it back to being a square edge orifice yet again, but somebody's been given that one hell of a hiding with a hammer trying to get it off or trying to get it on. There are some dunny heads about, but it's quite simple assembly now. Probably where I'll hook it up. The rear slinger cum seal assembly just pushes in, make sure it still spins. Now this is the pulley assembly, a bit of 1950s Bakelite, full of canvas no doubt. You can see a bit of a rag texture there, and it's got a nut firmly embedded into the back of it. And I don't think that they're screwed up too tight, but I did mention as I was dismantling this that you can see that the belt's only worn on 3/4 of the width of the pulley here. And I would suggest that would be because when you tighten everything up, the pulley is not really exposed all that much. I think that'll do for now. Okay, that's the internal spindle back together. Let's hope it runs smoothly. Bring you back later on if something else happens. Well, here's the quill back together, and an item I didn't show with this last bit, which is got to find the quill housing. If one of these gone for a walkabout, These will go in the front that way, and that's the grinding wheel quill, or spindle if you like, and quite a nice little collet nut, all held in by this long bolt at the back end. It's a very, very good assembly. Surprisingly, they get it to run within, you know, a tenth of a thou at the end of the length of the spindle, which I find to be a fantastic bit of engineering. Worst luck, I've only got one of these bodies, and that's a bit of a shame. So if anybody's got a disused J&S 1302 and you have another one of these quill holders, I would really appreciate it to try and complement what I don't have here. Okay, say goodbye in a sec. Okay, well that's it for gas bagging for today. I'll try and bring you a little instalment as each bit happens. It all depends on time, of course. Tomorrow herself has to have a haircut, so that'll lose a little bit out of the day. If there's any information you would like, just give me a call and I'll see if I can help you out there. I had one fellow ask me about the tension on the spindle bearings for this quill. Realistically, I think that as long as there is some, that's all that's important, and that it's not excessive. That's also important, and that you use oil for lube and you don't stuff it full of wheel bearing grease or something. That sort of product is not designed for the high surface feed that these things do. Okay, please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.